Huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible. Hi, welcome to a new episode of We Get It. My name is Cain. I'm the Program Director with Young Adult Cancer Canada. Thank you for joining us for this new episode. This season, we've actually changed things up a little bit, as you will notice. We will bring you every week, every Monday night, 7 p.m., we will bring you sessions that we have recorded and edited from our past events, sessions that are with amazing health professionals and friends across the country, some stories from Yackers as well. And we will talk about issues that are, we know, real things and real issues for the young adults we work with, and for topics like fear of cancer recurrence, body image, movement and exercise, mindfulness, legacy, palliative care. We are going to touch on a bunch of content. So we hope that those sessions are going to provide you with information and tools to help you live life and love life, and hope you get to join us every week and share with anyone who could be interested. So let's start now with this next episode of We Get It. Enjoy. We've been connected with Canadian Virtual Hospice for quite a while, and it's been, a really great relationship, and the work that they do is really wonderful. So we're super thrilled and happy to have people with us. So today, it is going to be around legacy, and I think if you're here, you're curious and want to learn some of this information. So I'll introduce you to our awesome speaker. There's going to be two parts to our session this afternoon. So first, we're going to hear from Austin and Danielle. So Austin received his Bachelor of Arts with honors. Bravo. In sociology from University of Manitoba in 2020, and is currently completing his Master of Information with a concentration in user experience design at the University of Toronto. His current research interests include digital sociology, human-computer interaction, man, that's fascinating, consumer culture, and gerontology. Easier for me to say in French. Danielle is a graduate student in the Institute of Political Economy at Carleton University. Her research interests relate to social reproduction, care work in long-term care settings, and worker well-being. In her role as assistant content developer with Canadian Virtual Hospice, Danielle supported projects related to digital estate planning and the grief of healthcare workers during the COVID pandemic, which I'm sure was super fascinating and heart-wrenching. Our healthcare workers, and you are part of it, have been working super hard. And lastly, we are going to hear from Ceilidh. Ceilidh is a certified child life specialist, a lecturer in child life and pediatric psychosocial care at McMaster University, PhD candidate in the Family Relations and Human Development Program at the University of Guelph. For 15 years, Ceilidh's clinical work and teaching focused on supporting children and families living with the serious illness, dying, or death of a family member. So all of you are not busy, as I can see. You're doing nothing, and you have very little experience, so whatever. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the presentation you prepared for us. So I'm going to give it away to first you, Austin and Danielle, for the first part of our workshop together.
And okay, let us begin. Okay, welcome. This is the Legacy Making Digital Planning Estate Planning Workshop. My name is Austin with Danielle and Ceilidh. Canadian Virtual Hospice provides support and personalized information about palliative and end-of-life care to patients, family members, healthcare providers, researchers, and educators. It's a safe place to get information you can trust at one of the most difficult times of life. The most comprehensive platform in the world on advanced illness, palliative care, and grief. We have accumulated 2.4 million visitors since its inception, and we get about 135,000 unique visitors per month, so it's fairly popular. What services does Cain Virtual Hospice provide? We have various ask and answered questions for professionals, Ask a Professional, programs and services related to palliative care and end-of-life care, in addition to grief and bereavement programs and services. We offer various caregiving videos that touch on various topics related to grief, bereavement, and end-of-life care and palliative care. And we also have a discussion board for grief and bereavement. And we also have various COVID-19 resources. And then we also have various Canadian Virtual Hospice platforms, mygrief.ca, Kids Grief, Living Out Loud, My Grief Toolbox, and Living My Culture. I would like to bring attention to Living Out Loud. It's for teens and young adults living with advanced illness. It is a site where young adults and teens share their own stories of advanced illness, communicate with the community, and you'll encounter videos touching on various topics such as relationships, daily life, stories about themselves, and what they're going through both emotionally and physically, decisions, and sex and fertility. And I'll just pass it off to Danielle.
Okay, so I'm going to provide a brief introduction to the workshop session on digital estate planning, where Austin will walk us through the process of creating our own digital estate plans. So like a traditional will, a digital estate plan will allow you to decide how and prepare for how you would like your assets to be handled. So traditional wills typically communicate your wishes for physical assets, but digital estate plans address your digital assets as well. So that might be a new term for many of us, but digital assets include personal information that is stored electronically, either on a computer or online in the cloud, and this all belongs to you. So essentially, digital assets encompass the totality of your online presence. So some digital assets might have monetary value. For example, if you collect air miles, those have value, and you might want to transfer that value to somebody else, such as a loved one. Other digital assets, such as photographs or maybe home movies, can be saved on personal computers, and you might want to share those memories with others as well. So there are 3 general steps to developing a digital estate plan. So this will include identifying a digital executor, and they'll carry out your wishes for your digital assets. So it's useful to maybe name this a digital executor within a traditional will and differentiate what are those digital assets that they'll control. So once you've done this, the next step is to create an inventory of your digital assets. So once you've collected this information, you can take time to identify maybe what are the most important assets to you. And then if you choose to meet with a formal estate planner, they can help you through the process of developing a plan to incorporate those within your estate plan as you would with a formal will. And then the last step is to prepare a digital estate binder. And this will essentially act as a roadmap for your executor. Your binder will provide access to the information that they need to carry out your wishes. So in this process, you'll write out instructions and detail how you'd like your digital executor to process your accounts. This sometimes requires some research as we don't always have this knowledge right on hand. And different digital assets can be handled differently. So with some, it's very easy to transfer this information to a loved one, whereas others, in other circumstances, this information might not be transferable. So in this case, it's useful to review account user agreements. So we did have some really interesting questions from the audience, and so we wanted to take some time to go over those as well before we get into the workshop. So here we have, is the digital estate plan a part or related to my will? So these are 2 complementary aspects of your estate plan. Traditional wills obviously will deal with your physical assets, but a digital estate plan builds on that understanding to also include those aspects of your life that you live out online. And so how do we go about finding the right person to help us make this plan? So of course, this might depend on individual circumstances, but a great place to start in developing your inventory might be to consult somebody that you know quite personally. They'd understand what digital assets you have and your wishes for those as well. And then once you've worked with that person, you might choose to bring those to a financial advisor or to an estate planner who can provide that more formal perspective. But again, that's based on individual preferences. But now that I've covered some of the basics to what a digital estate plan is, what are your digital assets, Austin's going to take us through the process of workshopping our own digital estate plans.
Okay, so let's begin with devices. So broadly speaking, we'll be tackling devices, but more so personal computers. So I tried to color code each section so that they're kind of related. That way it's easy for the eyes. So personal computers would be laptop, desktops. What we're looking for here are just your login information to access the computer and various important files that one may find on the computer. So this may be important photos, documentation, videos, anything worth mentioning that needs to be addressed or recorded from your computer. And then how to handle, give to a family member, delete upon death, whichever, whatever is more, whichever plan. And then we would go to the following. Oh, sorry, I made things like this. So on the same notes, we have other electronic devices. So if the previous slide was discussing personal computers such as your desktop or your laptop, other electronic devices would cover tablets, cellular devices, your iPhone, Android, your Kindle, whichever basically other electronic devices that have some kind of encryption that you need a username or password for. And then same thing, names of important files on these devices and how to handle. Okay, moving on to then online communication property. So now this is just your email accounts. So in this section, it's very straightforward, just your email, maybe associated username, password, answer to security questions that you may have set up when you initially created the accounts, and then once again, how to handle. As I'm walking through this digital estates planning template, I always like to remind everyone that this kind of provides a template, like a scaffold for you to refer to and add additional sections on. There's 4 rows. You're not limited to 4 rows. Feel free to add more if you so wish in the document that I found or I linked in the chats. Moving on. So we have social media accounts, same thing. So we live in a world where social media is rapidly evolving and it's very ubiquitous in our everyday lives. So it's important to not only mention the name of social media, but also the type of information stored. Many people may not know what Instagram, Snapchat actually does because they may not have used it. So it's important to specify what kind of content are on these or in the social media, how to handle your social media, and other various information to access your social media accounts. Blogs and websites. So if you have created a website or created a blog, it would probably go under this section. So recently, because I am studying to be a UX designer, I had to create a UX portfolio. So what I did was, so like name of the sites, Austin Bernie's UX portfolio, the web address. If you implemented admin privileges, then the user ID and password and security questions that may be associated with the account that you created for your website. And then what web hosting service you use for your website. So a web hosting service is a service that basically keeps your website up for the public to see. So in this case, because I created my website with Wix, my web hosting service is Wix, which segues neatly into web hosting services. So if the previous slide talked about websites, this is talking about the services that are behind the scenes and that what keeps your business or website running. Various examples, Wix, Squarespace are the most popular. HostGator, among other names, are also quite common. And then same thing, web address, name of sites, user ID, password PIN, everything associated with the web hosting service. So subscriptions. So this is a very broad category because subscriptions can be found in almost everything and anything. So as such, kind of keep in mind like monthly, yearly, weekly subscriptions. So it's important to write down the name of the subscription, the type of subscription to differentiate between like Netflix and a newsletter subscription. Web address of where you can find the subscription, how did you sign up for it? the user ID and password that are associated with your accounts, any security questions. The type of subscription is important to write down just for yourself, so you can like differentiate between, because once again, technology, there's a lot out. You don't realize it, but you are subscribed to a lot of things. Like sometimes I check my junk email and I'm just like, there's like 10 different things. And so it's good to organize them and realize, oh, okay, here are all my accounts. Because you don't really think about these things, right? Because it's easy to create an account and then just forget about it. It's like I have a sticky note with all my passwords. It's very, very overwhelming sometimes. But okay, moving on. I digress. Okay, retail, loyalty, and professional memberships. Okay, so these are accounts that you just purchase, either clothes, items, whichever. So like Amazon or Shopify are great examples for you to create an account, and that would go under this category. Same thing, super straightforward. Name of online store merchant, the web address, password, ID, answer security questions, and how to handle the loyalty programs and services. So Air Miles, Cineplex, these are the kind of services that usually accumulate points. Shoppers Drug Mart has their card, their Shoppers Optimum. Aeroplane, more rewards. Same thing. Like subscriptions, because there's so many different kinds of loyalty programs, there's also a section to write down the type of membership, just because if someone like Cineplex, the word itself may not be enough to be enough descriptor for someone who may not know. There's a question. What happens to your online accounts if you don't bother sending the info on? Does it really matter? Like the Netflix, for example. I feel like every organization and company has their own policies when it comes to these things. I would imagine everything would be like, okay. In your case, if it's really like this is for you. So if you don't want to include Netflix, if you think that's like in this context useless information, then that's like totally fine. It's more of like a master record sheet where you have all your information. That way no one's scrambling to figure out like, oh, what was this password, what was that email account. It's just more of a record of convenience is probably one of the best ways I can describe this, just because everything is all in one location and it's very centralized. So the template a Canadian Virtual Hospice has designed is more or less like a centralized way to kind of get people started. This is kind of like, yeah, it's a way to get people started. It's definitely a lot, just because of how widespread technology is in our everyday lives. Like as I mentioned before, we subconsciously just sign up for whatever and then we forget about it, right? And then you kind of ask yourself, okay, what is the importance of this subscription? Should I mention it? Is it safe to ignore it? Right? Like
I'm with you, like in the sense that I got like a little moment of shallow breath when I was like I'm everywhere. But maybe as we're listening to you, Austin, it's to maybe start to sort through those I really know actually have things that is like, okay, if I have to start somewhere to start organizing things, then I'm sure I'm going to forget a bunch. I'm sure there's going to be stuff that I haven't opened myself in 10 years, but it's to start somewhere, I guess.
It's good to think about the most obvious things that come to mind, and then thinking about like, okay, is this important or is this non-important? Because this will jog your memory into thinking about those peripheral accounts that you may not have signed up like 10 years ago and like, oh wait, no, this is important. So awesome question. Let us resume. So loyalty program services, as I mentioned, so we covered that. Professional memberships. So if you are part of a professional organization, this is where you put your information on. So for example, I'm part of the Canadian Sociological Association, or Danielle and I are part of the Canadian Sociological CSA. We're part of CSA, and so just basic login information for if you are concerned for more of like your academic or professional, the side of your life. If you want to get that organized, this would be a great place to do it. And then benefits. So name of benefit account provider, Blue Cross account owner. It may be under you or your partner's name, depending on your accounts. The benefit web address, where can your friends and family find additional information, and then user ID, password, answers to security questions, and how to handle. And then moving on to online storage. So this is like Dropbox, iCloud, stuff that you keep online and in nice secure spots. This is just so those documents that may not be on your desktop computer or on your phone, but are just in the cloud. And then name of storage, user ID, password, answer security questions, type of file. Oh, type of file, if you want to specify if it's a PDF, Word document, Excel spreadsheets, that way it's easier to find. And then creative / intellectual property. So if you've written a book or if you published a journal article, for example, this is where you would organize all that information. So like title, intellectual property. So in this case, like it'd be like teaching medicine with the help of Dr. House, the creation date / issue, the reference number that's used to find the journal article itself, if it is a journal article. Location, where would we find this piece? Maybe it was stored like on your computer or it's stored on the cloud. The description, brief description of what this property entails, and then how to handle. And then banking, finance, and security. Okay, so this is a fairly complex section. We understand not everyone has their information in front of them, so bear with me, but this is just kind of a way to like get everyone to start thinking. So payment cards, credit card, Visa card, name of institution, user ID, password, all your banking information, account number, type of account, how to handle, etc. And then we have financial software. So if you have software that handles your finances, such as like TurboTax, Future Advisor, or Personal Capital, this would be a section to organize all that information under. Similarly to the banking and cards, password, user ID, security questions, account number, and how to handle. And then, okay, so I was going to come into this presentation saying, okay, maybe not a whole lot of people have stocks. But recently in the news, GameStop has been happening. So I don't know if anyone out there has any stocks in GameStop. But if you do, here's the section to put that stuff down. So this is a great place to do that. Stocks, name of institution, user ID, password, PIN, answer security questions, account number, how to handle. This is fairly complex, and so once again, don't worry if not all this information is in front of you. It's just a way to like start thinking about the more nuanced things of banking, the stuff we rarely think about. Income taxes. So maybe you have external or additional financial software that handles like federal income tax payments or prior computerized tax returns, service / software name that's related to the income taxes. And then once again, where did you access the service, the user ID, password that's associated with your accounts, and security questions, account number, and how to handle. And then government accounts, like such as the Employment Social Development Services. Once again, the name of the institution in which you found this service from, user ID, password, PIN, answer security questions, and how to handle. And then banking, finance, and security, so utilities. So this is trying to, once again, taking all the peripheral information and centralizing them. So name of company, company web address, user ID, password, security questions, how to handle. Not all services are going to have security questions. I've included security questions just for convenience sake. Not everyone, like if you don't have a security question, that's okay. But if, just in case people were wondering. And then you have like the home security systems. So like property description, your property address, security company, system password, how to handle. We have like cryptocurrency. So the name of cryptocurrency, where did you find this cryptocurrency, the user ID and associate email associated with your cryptocurrency, and then password and security questions, how to handle. And then video game accounts. There are some video games that have monetary value. So the name of the video game name, developer website, user ID, associated email, security questions, and then multi-factor authentication information. This was something I wanted to, as I made a comment earlier, some websites offer multi-factor authentication. I always like to talk about how we live in a world of immediate gratification because we have Amazon Prime, Netflix, Uber Eats, Takeout, like everything's at the tip of our fingers. And a lot of these services require an account or some type of commitment. It's definitely a bit of a headache because, like, especially when you go into the financial section, like stocks, bonds, like where do you even begin? It's definitely overwhelming. So hopefully this template centralizes it and just makes it like marginally easier, I hope. There are various applications and templates out there Canadian Virtual Hospice just tries to be as inclusive as possible and ask or remind the user of areas in which they may have an account, password, associated email, all that important information. We noticed that a lot of the other templates are not as exhaustive as they should be because they're out of date. Because this is being recorded only available. Yes, a lot of the services and templates out there are not exhaustive or they're out of date. So we're just trying to like keep up to date because technology is evolving quite rapidly. So we have to be mindful of all the different sectors. And then there's create your own. So at the very, very end of the document that I attached, I just create a blank custom. Technically, you can customize all of them. But if you want to dedicate an entire page to it, it's there. If you want more room, don't write all your important information on this piece of paper. It's probably smart to secure it in a password protected file such as Google Drives. Google Drive, if you have a Gmail account, you can copy my documents into a Google Doc document and secure it there. I strongly encourage everyone to download the document and keep it on their computer and store all their information online. Writing everything on the physical copy, if you print it out, is just a different way to work with the templates. But for security's sake, keeping your digital asset inventory or record in a digital platform would be very convenient. That way you know where it is at all times. I love to talk. If anyone has a question, feel free to ask.
Yeah, thank you. That was super interesting, and I think maybe things that I didn't want to think about. So I will start to think about it.
Yes, I have a giant new to-do list that I didn't know I had now too. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears, and I'm really happy to be here and talking with everyone today. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so a lot of times when I hear people talking about legacy creation or legacy building, it's in a hospital context. In my experience, people kind of have common perceptions of it, where on one end, it's kind of a financial legacy, leaving endowments or leaving money or belongings to people. And certainly that can be part of it. But on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of times in the hospital, it's people think of legacy building as the thing that you do in the very last moments. And I really want to get away from that and have a much broader idea about what legacy building is and can be. And that really it's a spectrum. So Jessica Bowles wrote this lovely piece about legacy, and she talks about 3 different ways that people kind of conceptualize it. One is legacy leaving, and that can include the endowments kind of thing, or money, or anything. I mean, air miles, anything you can think of, special items. So that would be one kind of legacy. Legacy making includes, but is not limited to, what we think about in the hospital, doing activities that sort of memory making. And then the last way that she talks about it is legacy living. And that's that just by being and having relationships and interactions with other people, you are perpetually constructing your legacy. So she used this, she said it so nicely, I thought, that legacy is a universal human experience, one that's enacted in experiences by persons of all ages and all conditions. So it really isn't about, it's not tied to a prognosis or even being sick at all. That a lot of things that I think of as some of the wonderful pieces of legacy are things that weren't even intended as a legacy activity, but it can be things like, I don't know how many of you might have done the preschool activity where you trace your hand and make it into a turkey and bring that home, or like Mother's Day cards or Father's Day cards with handprints, anything like that. Or like when a child gets their first haircut and we keep a lock of hair. My grandmother bought me a hoodie for my 21st birthday half a life ago, and every time I put it on, it's so ratty and I have so many warm memories. She didn't mean that as a legacy. She wasn't sick at the time. It's something that connects me to her forever. So it's not it doesn't have to be something that you do when you're sick because you're sick. It's just something that we do because we want to have a keepsake or hold on to this memory for the future. Okay, so, oh yes, this is my note to self. It really doesn't have to have these kinds of ominous implications. Oh, we're doing legacy work, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to do that. It's not time yet. It's not that serious. I don't have to think about it. But you don't have to have any of those attachments to it. It can just be, I'm going to share a couple examples of things that I think of as legacy activities that are things that we've done because of the lockdown, as ways to help us feel really close and connected to the people in our family who we used to be able to see all the time and now we can't.
And we have, as you were talking, Kaylee, I don't know if you got to see, but we had a few people say what legacy meant to them. To actively.
Oh, I didn't.
That's okay. That I can help you with that, but to actively be involved in how I want to be remembered or for what, leaving behind what you believe is important to you and empowering other people with your belief. Legacy for me is allowing our spirit to stay with our loved ones. So those are some of the comments we've had while you were talking.
Oh, thank you for those. I love that. That's such a nice illustration of the range too. Sometimes it's something tangible. Sometimes it's that piece about our spirit staying connected. My minimally verbal 3-year-old has been asking me a lot about what happens when somebody or something dies. We had like a 10-minute conversation yesterday about, he imagines there's a truck that goes and picks up dead pigeons off the road and takes them to a special pigeon hospital. So he's like very concretely oriented, and he was asking me about my dad and what happened to my dad when he died, and where is his body, and what about his head, and what about his face, and all these super concrete details. And so I'm focused on the concrete, and then he goes, but you still feel his love. Oh, and so I just, yes, all those bits are legacy, including that super abstract, just emotional, not just super intangible connection that you feel. I'm super guilty of tangents. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so I wanted to go through each one at a time about the different types of legacy. So leaving something, and maybe it's about, I guess I wanted to highlight too all the different things that it can be. It can be leaving a scrapbook. It can be leaving a recipe book, whatever is meaningful and important to you, which I think some of those chat comments really highlighted. It doesn't have to be a particular kind of thing. Your legacy is as unique as you are. It can be special clothes or special stuffies, or like my hoodie from my grandma, anything like that. The legacy making, and I think what's really sort of like the crux of this one is that it's making something with somebody so that you have the thing that you share at the end of it, but more importantly, the time that you spent doing it. And it's like that shared space of making the thing together, working on it together, being in it together. Maybe you're talking about something while you're doing it, maybe you're not, but you're going to always remember that time, not just the thing. The thing is really just the thing is a flag to remind you of that time. And when I talk about it with kids, which is who I'm usually talking with, I really think when you make something, anything, you're infusing it with all of the feelings that go into it. And chefs talk about that all the time. Food tastes better if you've got love in your heart. If you're angry when you're cooking, it doesn't taste as good. And I really think anytime, when you think about a kid coming home with their little project from school, there's so much more to it than a piece of paper. There's all the heart and feeling that went into it. So that's one of the things I think is really so invaluable about the making legacy.
Someone was asking, would a trip fall in that category?
Oh, so yes, absolutely, for sure. And I think I don't mean to categorize so much. I think this is really a continuum. And I think a trip is somewhere on the right half of this screen where it's making and it's living. That living, so many shared moments and experiences. I think it's also like when you go on a trip and you're learning something together, changing and growing together. And that's something like you just end up with your fingerprints all over each other's souls when you're doing something like that together. And so when in Jessica Bowles' article, she really talks about how the legacy living is all about experiences and relationships. It's ongoing and relational. You're never finished. It's always evolving. I really appreciate you reading the chat because I can't see it while I'm presenting. And
I'm happy. That's why I'm here. So I'm happy to do that.
So one of the things that kind of distinguishes the left side of the screen from the right is that the ones on the left, people think about them having an implied intention. Like if you're leaving something on purpose, not like my grandmother's hoodie, but if you want to leave something to somebody on purpose, if you have a feeling and you need to enact that intention, that can be something like this. Although you can also be using that intentionally planning your trip together. So there's different ways to do any of this. I guess what I wanted to highlight here is that really all of this totally depends on and should be shaped by what feels important for you. Do you feel like there's something that you want to do or something you want to convey on purpose? Or is it more about the shared presence, the shared time together? So if you feel like you want to do something that feels like you did it on purpose with intention, maybe there's something in here for you.
There's a beautiful comment that I'll say before you jump into the next part. And I hope it's okay that I interrupt you that way.
Oh, please, it's not interrupting. It's a conversation.
Okay. Legacy. So it's really nice. Legacy for me is how I want to be remembered for who I am and not for what I did. I want to leave a mark of positivity, love, and inspiration. And that's the legacy I want to make and leave for others and be remembered for. Thank you for that.
So awesome. And I wish I could quote, I wonder if it's a Maya Angelou quote that's somewhere in the depths of my brain. It might be somebody else who said, you don't remember what someone said, you don't remember what they did, but you remember how you made them feel. And that's what that reminds me of.
That's what it is. Yeah. Thank you for that.
So the piece that I put here about it being regardless of illness is that these memory making or legacy making and legacy living, they can also be happening whether you're conscious of doing it as a legacy activity or not. Anytime you're cooking together, or listening to music together, or going on a trip together, you are growing that legacy, whether or not you're thinking about it and meaning to. But there's also, especially now as we are all isolated, physically distanced from one another, there are some things that we have to do individually and others that we can do more together. So some of the legacy leaving stuff is more aligned with doing it independently, where some of the legacy making and living stuff is more about doing it together. But I will say, I think there are some really creative ways of doing things together. The way that, I've seen people send supplies into someone's home, let it sit for a week untouched for the germs, and then coming and bringing the same supplies and sitting outside the window, or doing it on Zoom and doing an activity together, even though you're in two different places. Sort of there's a camp in a box thing where in the summer, right, you get the whole camp supplies stuff dropped off, and then camp happens over Zoom and every kid has the same supplies in their spaces. And so another nice piece about that is if you're doing that on Zoom, you can record it, and then you have the recording of the time you spent together as well.
And maybe it's a bit too out there, but I was reading The Living Bubble, and I thought because we've been talking about it a little bit since the beginning of conference, how working on experiences with ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, the relation we have with ourselves, I think in many ways can help us be the person we want to be in the world, and then by itself creates a different type of legacy of relation with others, because we take care of the one with ourselves as well. So there's an individuality within that bubble as well.
That is so not too out there. I completely agree. And I think sometimes, you know, when we're torn in so many places and we have a feeling of, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I want to do something, I don't know what to do. When we're scattered, it's really hard to live and be the way you want to live and be. And so taking some time to reflect on what is important to you, what is what is it about you that you want people to remember? What are the feelings you want them to remember? I think going through that absolutely helps kind of quiet some of the static and helps you be more connected with that and live more that way. Thanks for bringing that out. I just wanted to give a couple of examples, although I may be being excessive here, but just if cooking is your thing, maybe it's leaving recipes, maybe it's a freezer full of food that you want to give to somebody. The making can be making it together. I have a friend who's a chef and she's been teaching her friends' kids how to cook on Zoom. And so they've been doing the cooking together. And that sort of straddles both the making and the living. But just to say that it doesn't have to be writing or money or a thing. If it's cooking, there's a way to make that. If it's music, there's a way for that to be the thing. I will always remember. So maybe it's that you're leaving recordings or instruments or something really special. But I always think of one family I worked with so long ago. They had 5 kids between the ages of like 10 and 18. And the oldest brother was dying, and he decided he was going to teach his younger siblings, 3 of them who were interested, how to play guitar. And so they had a lot of guitar lessons, and then he made them each a necklace with a guitar pick as the pendant. And after he died, some of the kids just kept playing and felt so close and connected with them, and others that was too hard for a long time, but they had the pick and they enjoyed listening. And it was just like such a unique but beautiful, meaningful connection. And he wasn't a person who was going to write letters about his feelings, but this was such a beautiful way for him to leave this forever. And then as the kids kept learning guitar even after he had died, they just continued to feel such a strong connection with him. So whether it's playing or recording together or continuing to learn it, so no matter what your thing is, there's a way to continue to create a legacy that's meaningful for you. And I just wanted to highlight again that we've all been doing this all along, whether we meant to or not. We are leaving our prints on everybody's lives all the time. And it's just about, is there a feeling in you that you want to do this in a particular way, that you want to manifest it in a particular way? And if there is, then let's figure out how to do that in the way that's most right for you. And that's totally up to you. It doesn't, what you do, if you do anything, when and with whom, totally, there's no right or wrong or better or worse. It's just what fits for you. So I just wanted to put out there for a second to give people a moment to think about if there is something that feels right to you, or if it needs to marinate for a while. What would you want people to know and remember about you now and in the future? Because it's not all just for once I'm gone. There is also a how do I want people to see me now that's just as important and valuable. One of the things that I think is really striking that I keep learning is just that some of the things that people miss most or that people wish most are just the most basic, mundane. I wish I knew what their favorite band was in high school. I wish I knew what it's the little details, the mundane. You just miss the day-to-day little stuff. So it doesn't have to be something big and elaborate, but there are kind of themes. So when people think about what I want people to remember or to hold on to, or what I want. It's I want to make sure that they know how I feel. And this is on Virtual Hospice's website about legacy building. These quotes, so Dr. Ira Byock talks about the 4 statements that matter most. And it's, who do you need to tell I love you, thank you, forgive me, and I forgive you. And whether that's in person or in writing, whether that's now or for them to find out later on, whatever feels right for you. But I just found those to be such clear, simple, impactful statements. So sometimes it's, I want to make sure they know how I feel. Sometimes it's, I want to make sure they know what I want. So this is a little more like advanced care plans, or I'm going to share a couple of documents that I find really lovely and user-friendly and helpful. I want to make sure they know my story. And so this gets to kind of some of those more things that you might not think of as the things that people will want to know about you, or wish they knew, or just wish they had more time to have learned. And then there's also really this, I want to make sure that they'll think of me and that they'll remember me, and that they have a way to kind of shape the way that people do that. Wanting to make sure I know how I feel. Sometimes this is about expressing it, and sometimes it's the doing it together and the being together. Sometimes one thing that I always think of when I talk with kids is sometimes if I'm working with a child who didn't get to say goodbye in that time that they thought of as the time to say goodbye, and worry, well, did they know that I love them? Did they know how I felt? I always try to remind people that, like, we know the people in our lives, we know how we feel about each other from our entire history of our relationship together. If there was one day where we didn't get to say it out loud, we still know from every other time together how strong those feelings are. So it might not be that you need to say anything out loud now or in the future, but that you want to be together. These are some of my most favorite activities in the world, and they're the most adaptable. So this one on the left, I've taken off the internet, this picture, but I've made a group hug for a colleague who was in the hospital, and everyone on our team had their handprints. And it's just, you imagine, you want to put your handprints as far apart as your reach. We've done this with blankets before, back in the days when lots of people could come and visit somebody in a hospital or at home. And so you have a big, regular hospital sheets work awesome too. Doesn't need to be fancy. It can be anything. Just trace your hands on both ends, and you can write permanent markers, fabric paints, whatever you have. Write notes or wishes or memories. I had one girl I was working with was a teenage girl, and her friends would come to visit and they just didn't know what to say. It was like, man, being a teenager is hard and awkward at the best of times, let alone coming to visit somebody in a hospital. And so we drew a grid on her blanket, and every time somebody came by, they would draw a picture of their favorite memory together, and the quilt got fuller and fuller. And it's just such a lovely thing. This hug, this is a knit version, which is way above my pay grade, but I have usually make them just out of fabric and just cut strips so it looks like a scarf, and you trace your arm on the ends and decorate in between. This one on the right is one that my sister, I have a very much younger sister who was my kid's nanny for a while, and they were so sad not to be able to see her for 3 months. So we made her this. So the blue hand is my son's hand traced, the yellow hand is my daughter's, and it's their arms distance apart. And we just talked about how this has soaked up their love, and this is just for like the separation, even a temporary separation. It's such a nice connection. But I also know of families who, it's so beautiful to have this, and whether the person who was sick left it for their family or other people made them for the person who was sick, or both, they're just such simple things.
They're beautiful. One of our participants shared that she has an email account for her son that she emails every now and then with her feelings on that day, favorite memories. And when she passes, you will get access to it and will be able to read all the emails she wrote.
I love that so much. That's such an awesome plan. So this is another one. So these are two different kinds of beads. I really love beads because lots of times people don't feel artistic, but they want to make something. And these are like, you can't screw it up. There's no artistic ability required. So the ones on the left, if you look at the top, it's showing all these different shapes. And those are the shapes of paper that you cut out. So this is a piece of a calendar. And I use calendar paper because it's colorful. This is not the most colorful example I could have chosen, but it's colorful and it's nice, thick paper. So what I love to do is encourage people to choose as whatever colors of pieces, whatever colors they want, cut as long of a strip as you feel like. The longer the strip, the fatter the bead. The widest part of the paper is how wide your bead will be. And then on the back, you can write a memory, you can write a wish, you can write, I love you, you can write whatever you want to write. And then you take a toothpick or the middle of a pen or a chopstick, whatever, and you just roll it up. Once you get it started, it's much easier. The first bit is the trickiest. So you just roll it up around the toothpick, and then they end up looking like the beautiful beads on the bottom left corner. And you glue, here, I'm almost there. You can use any kind of glue, Elmer's school glue, glue stick, anything. And when you get to about the last couple inches, just put glue along the back. And then you roll it up the rest of the way. And where's my camera? There we go. There's the bead. So it's lovely because it's also got the message on the inside. So if somebody's feeling like you don't want to have it advertised everywhere, but you want it captured, it's in there. And the ones in the picture are shiny because you can coat them with clear nail polish and then it makes them even water resistant.
This is so cool.
Isn't that fun? And then I usually make like a legend where I write which bead has which message if you want to have that record, because you obviously are not going to unpeel it. I love it. And I always talk about how like those feelings, the memories, the wishes, they're always in you, but sometimes you really need something tangible to help you feel connected with it.
Yes, someone was saying for the connection for Christmas, she got a blanket with all her extended family's name on it so they can be supporting her during COVID.
I love that.
Making
so awesome.
A yearly photo book to give to my family. I order an extra book and put them in my hope chest box of items I want my son to have when he's older. So it's to collect those things. These are great. And I want to make those beads with people.
Oh, they're so fun. And I really think you guys should compile all the things you've already suggested into you. Like you are a resource. You have a giant resource list.
Yeah.
The beads on the right they can be plasticine, they can be Fimo. So what the way I used to use them at work and the way that I use them again with my kids and my sister before lockdown was to choose one color of plasticine or Fimo for each person in the family. So you start off with, so for my kids, my two kids and my sister, so they had red, yellow, and blue. And then I said, okay, so I want you each to start smushing those colors together. And as you smush them together, think about all the times you've been together, all the activities you've done together, and how the more time you spend together, the more you influence each other, the more you change each other, or be more and more connected with one another. And then once they've done that for a while and the beads started to look like this. So then I said, okay, so now take the colors apart. And you cannot take the colors apart. You cannot take you out of your relationship. Your smushed and intertwined and interconnected. The more time you spend together, the more swirled up you are together. There's no taking it apart. So even though you're separate physically, you're still all tangled into each other, and you can't undo that. So my youngest made a snowman. And again, so used my toothpick to make a little hole in the bottom, and then you bake it. And my daughter made beads. My sister made beads, so they can be a bracelet, a necklace, whatever you like. I would love to figure out how to make them look like the top beads in this slide, but it doesn't matter what they look like.
No, I guess not.
So the last sort of activity that I wanted to share was just a family tree, just especially as we're all physically disconnected. Like, the idea of that quilt is so beautiful, and the calendars, anything that helps us to see all the people we're connected with, because we're not always feeling it. And so a nice, tangible, visible thing. And they don't have to be the fancy, formal family trees that you think of. I love the fingerprints one. It's so simple, and just get everybody when they come over, or to send in their own little fingerprint in the mail, however you do it, or the photos. Just feel everybody's presence around, and remember, you can write like something you learned on the branches. You could write on each branch something you learned, or something you remember, or something you love about that person. Okay, so then moving on to that second, I just hope. So I just hope they know what I want. I am in love with this document. And there are a couple versions of this, but this one from the Conversation Project is free. So the link is here. I'm happy to share the PDF. They have, some of the pages are about this kind of thing, like what's important to me about decisions about my care. But there are also pages about, if I'm uncomfortable, this is what I want. Here are the signs, here are the indicators that I'm uncomfortable. And it's everything from like, I'm not talking, to I'm curled up in a ball, whatever. And then what's helpful, and who do you want present, and who do you want included, and how do you want people to celebrate you? So it's about a 10 or 12 page document, I think. I just wanted to share a simple example. This one,
documents, I'm sorry, we can find most of those on Virtual Hospice, Canadian Virtual Hospice site, correct?
I am sure you can find links to them. I don't know if the actual documents are there.
But link to access the documents.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. This one, oh yes, Austin.
Our site is being reconstructed, so I would imagine that if these links, check back when our new site is launched, and we'll see. I'll pass this along, but this is a good question. Okay.
All right.
Quick interjection.
Thanks. So 5 wishes you do have to order and pay for, and it's very similar, and there are different versions of it for younger and older people. I want them to know the real me and my story. I just cannot get over how many of these write your own memoir books there are. There's like conversations with my dad, conversations with my mom, all kinds of, there's every possible version of it. If you want something to help follow along. I really love the sending an email when the spirit moves you. I'm not sure if people are familiar with dignity therapy. Certainly there is stuff about dignity therapy on Virtual Hospice's website, but these are the questions. These are the life questions that are part of dignity therapy. And these are often used for a clinician to get to know a patient better in order to help inform, like to get a better idea about how you want, what kind of care do you want. But they're also really life story questions. What are the parts you remember most? What do you think is most important about your life? When did you feel most alive? Important roles you've played, things you're proud of, things that still need to be said to your loved ones, words or instructions you'd like to offer your family. You can Google dignity therapy questions and this will pop up, but it's also on Virtual Hospice. And then I just want to make sure they'll think of me or they'll remember me. So starting traditions can be really great, and then you get to be part of it in the celebrations for as long as you want and can, and that's pretty wonderful. And it doesn't have to be like a birthday or a big deal. It can be Taco Tuesdays. We've been having online euchre with my family once a month or so. It's super informal, but it's just nice to get into a routine and know that that's a thing we do. And then if people are able to continue that, I just think of a wonderful colleague of mine, Chris Newman, who died recently. She used to talk about starting days. So she would talk about, for herself, when she died, she wanted people to always, on my birthday, eat chocolate, drink tea, read a good book, wear yellow, and call a friend. And so every year she would say, what you really want is for every year on your birthday for people to do that in perpetuity. So eventually there's your grandkids are awkwardly forced to wear yellow, eat chocolate, like whatever you decided, and remember you and talk about you, even though they never met you. And I love that idea, that because it just keeps you so present, and you get to enjoy it in the meantime. So those are the me days. And a lot of people have, if you have a special connection with a particular, I just have a lot of stories from families I've met who had, like, they just knew every time they saw a dragonfly that it was their person, or every time there was, that halo around the sun. So it can be things like that. And the girl actually who we made the quilt with, her mom told me that she knows every time she goes to the cemetery and the stone is warm from the sun, that her daughter's been there. And so there's just all kinds of ways, and it's different for every person and family. I just really wanted to emphasize, though, that it's what, when, why, how feels right for you. There's no right or wrong way. There's no too soon or too late. It doesn't have to be because of an illness or at a certain point in your experience. It's just, this is a conscious way of influencing this process. And this is another quote from Jessica Bowles from that same article, that legacy is a lifelong process of co-creation between ourselves and others as we create, internalize, represent memories in meaningful ways, and that it really is regardless of long-term prognosis. And just emphasizing, as she does, that legacies are personal and relational, and reflections of our histories, our current activities, and our hopes for the future.
And there is a sense of relief. I think sometimes I've had conversations with some of our community members where either for themselves they were okay with talking about those things, but their loved ones or people closer, it's almost like if we talk about it, it's going to happen. And ultimately, no, that's not how it works. And there was a real sense of relief once they had made some of their wishes clearer, once they started some kind of process that they felt made them feel good, that resonated with them. And so I think ultimately it is to support each other and then to get support as well, to figure out how to do this. But I've heard a lot of people say, I spent some time looking into what I would want, and I feel so much better now. So there's that.
I totally agree. And I think it is a hard conversation to bring up with family if we imagine that our family is going to be the least bit uncomfortable or sad or anything. And so the more prepared we can be for ourselves, knowing what we want, the easier it is to say, okay, listen, I know this is hard to talk about, but I really want you to know, and here's what I want you to know.
Yeah, I personally really appreciate these conversations are important. And we have them like randomly at times at events. Sometimes we've had sessions like these, At retreats, I think, which our retreats are a bit smaller, we often have a chance to maybe dig into some of those pieces a bit more. But I just love how ultimately I feel like what we've just talked about this afternoon is about living, about life, how we live now, and how this can influence our choices, what we want to leave after. But a lot of people were saying, well, it's really about every day and what happens every day. And people are just saying thank you, giving us a lot to think about and to sit with. And I would hope that, of course, Canadian Virtual Hospice is a beautiful resource. So I would say go and navigate and see. And of course, YAC and the community, we want to be here for you. So as you figure out some of this and as you think about some of this, we have the chat. So there's going to be a chat after our session tonight. There's going to be one tomorrow. There's one every week. But there are all kinds of spaces and places where please come talk about it, ask questions, ask for support. I think there's a lot of, let's not talk about those things in society in general, where really it's super important. So I really want to thank you, all three of you. Like, I think the digital thing has blown my mind a little bit. Austin and Danielle, I won't lie. I'm like, oh my God. And talking about legacy, Ceilidh, thank you so much for this. Very, very grateful for all you three for coming today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for organizing and for including us. It was so nice to talk with you today.